Welcome to the Oregon Trail. Dirt, despair, and broken dreams. You begin this journey not with a heroic trumpet blast or the rustle of destiny's curtain, but with the creak of ungreased wagon wheels and the overwhelming stench of salted pork gone marginally off. You are standing in Independence, Missouri, which is less a portal to glory and more a chaotic mud pit filled with shouting men, snorting oxen, and children already crying for home. Congratulations, you've decided to go west. And by decided, we mean you were manipulated by land pamphlets, wild rumors, and the kind of blind optimism that fuels terrible historical decisions. The Oregon Trail, stretching over 2,000 miles of desolate plains, swamps, rivers, and mountains, is not a gentle jaunt through scenic America. It is a slow, grinding descent into physical exhaustion, gastrointestinal betrayal, and the rapid erosion of all civilized pretense. If you're imagining yourself as a noble pioneer in a wide-brimmed hat, gazing westward into opportunity, know that by mile 10 you'll be limping, sunburned, and reconsidering your life choices while your oxen try to eat the map. But let's step back. Let's begin at the beginning, which is to say, packing. You do not pack for the Oregon Trail the way you pack for a weekend retreat or a family vacation. This is not, did I remember my socks? This is, will forgetting this hatchet doom us to cannibalism by late August? The covered wagon you're loading is not an RV. It is a wooden rectangle on wheels, slightly larger than a modern minivan and significantly more deadly. There is no suspension, no insulation, no brakes. The floorboards flex. The canvas top leaks. The wheels are wooden circles of denial, liable to splinter at a sneeze. Into this rolling coffin you must cram everything needed to sustain life for 6 months. Beans, flour, lard, bacon, dried apples, a small barrel of vinegar, rope, tools, extra axles, a fiddle for morale, cast iron cookware, blankets, water barrels, matches, more bacon, a medical kit, a Bible, your children, your hopes, and your irrational belief that all of this will go smoothly. Spoiler, it won't. Inevitably, someone brings a piano. It will not survive Kansas. Arguments break out over what's essential. One person insists on bringing books. Another tries to sneak in a rocking chair. You remind everyone, again, that we are crossing a continent, not redecorating a parlor. Emotions run high. Trust collapses. The oxen remain unimpressed. Speaking of oxen, let us introduce your new co-workers. They are not horses. They are not majestic. They are stubborn, slow, and smell like despair. You have likely named them something endearing. Buttercup, Chestnut, Hank. But by week 2, they will be known only as, Why Won't You Move? God Damn It, and Still Hank. Oxen are powerful, but uninterested in your dreams. They respond to your voice with flatulence, to your commands with side eye. They will trample your foot without apology and stare at you while doing it. You will spend the next several months in a state of fragile alliance with these beasts, desperately trying to keep them alive while they actively plot against your emotional stability. Now, let's talk about Day 0, also known as Departure Day, also known as the day everything goes wrong immediately. You wake up early. The sun is shining. You've loaded the wagon, said tearful goodbyes, and braced your soul for the great American adventure. 10 minutes later, the wheel breaks. You haven't even left the town boundary. A pin snaps, an axle groans. You are on your knees in the mud, bleeding from a splinter, already sweating through your shirt, while your neighbor watches with thinly veiled glee. Welcome to the Oregon Trail. Nothing about this is efficient. The moment you leave the relative chaos of civilization, you enter the far more complicated chaos of wilderness logistics. The roads are rutted, the terrain uneven, and the trail itself is less a clear path than a suggestion laid over dirt. Every hill is a death trap in waiting. Every creek is a potential disaster. Your wagon is already too heavy. Everyone's wagon is too heavy. Within days, people begin throwing things out. The fine china, the cradle, the second barrel of salt. A rocking chair is abandoned in the middle of nowhere, alone and confused. The trail becomes a graveyard of poor decisions. You begin walking beside your wagon because riding in it is both miserable and impractical. Inside, it's hot, cramped, and filled with the symphony of clanking pans and crying children. The wagon bounces like a wooden trampoline with vengeance issues. Your spine files a formal complaint. Outside, at least there is air and the faint illusion of progress. But even this is a punishment. The dust coats your clothes, your face, your teeth. You taste trail. You taste dirt. You develop a relationship with dirt. Your boots betray you. Your socks fuse with your feet. Blisters bloom. Your water runs low. Someone drinks from a stream without boiling it and begins a countdown to doom. The sky, meanwhile, watches with perfect indifference. Rain appears without warning and drenches everything you own. Firewood soaks. Clothing sags. Canvas collapses. Lightning cracks in the distance. The oxen chew, unaffected, and through it all, you keep moving. Because that is the rule of the trail. You move forward, always forward. Whether you're sick, bleeding, or spiritually broken, you keep walking. Because the trail does not care. The trail does not wait. It just stretches on and on. A 2,000-mile metaphor for futility and national ambition wrapped in cholera and broken dreams. But don't worry, it gets worse. By now, you've probably realized that nothing about this experience matches the myth. This isn't a sweeping saga of noble settlers forging destiny with grit and purpose. It's a slow-motion train wreck featuring livestock, diarrhea, and mild hallucinations. You thought you were escaping society for freedom. Instead, you're sleeping in a pile of damp burlap beside a man snoring like a dying mule. Someone ate the last apple and lied about it. Someone else is hoarding beans. There's tension in the air. And beans. Always beans. As the days blend together, you lose track of dates, distance, and hygiene. Bathing is a rumor. Toothbrushing a luxury. Your breath begins to alarm local wildlife. The pickled cabbage has turned, spiritually and chemically. But still, you march on, because the only way out is through. Somewhere ahead is Oregon. You are assured it is real, fertile, green, free. No one mentions the swamps, or the rain, or the fact that the land must still be cleared, ploughed, and defended. But that's later. For now, all you can do is survive this chapter, this cart-rattling, oxen-cursing, bowel-disrupting ordeal of dust, doom, and delusion. Welcome to the Oregon Trail. Wipe your feet. It won't help. Dust in your teeth. Blisters in your soul. You were told the first few miles would be the hardest. That was a lie. The first few miles are merely the soft prelude, the light warning cough before the full-on fever dream of trail life begins. What they meant to say was that the first few miles are where your illusions die quietly in the dust. You have now officially left Independence, Missouri. The town is behind you. So is the last real roof you'll see for months. Ahead of you stretches the trail, a thin and unforgiving line gouged into the earth by those who came before and regretted it deeply. The road isn't a road at all. It's a suggestion of direction, rutted by wagon wheels, carved by desperation, and generously sprinkled with dried dung and false hope. Your boots, which were described in the shop as frontier ready, begin their betrayal by the second hour. The leather creaks ominously. The seams whisper threats. Blisters form like colonies. By mile 5, the boots are no longer protective gear. They're instruments of psychological warfare. Every step sends a pulse of regret up your spine. You walk anyway, because everyone walks. The idea of riding in the wagon has already proven laughable. Inside, it's an oven made of wood and disappointment. Every bump is a spiritual test. The children are already fighting. The bedding has unrolled itself into chaos. The pickled cabbage has tipped over. You ride for exactly 3 minutes before realizing you'd rather risk blisters than vertebral collapse. So you walk, and the dust begins. It rises with every step, every wheel, every oxen hoof. It settles into your hair, your ears, your lungs. You breathe it, taste it, become it. Your teeth are coated. Your nostrils have turned into miniature deserts. Your water, limited and lukewarm, does nothing but rearrange the dust in your mouth into muddy paste. By noon, your body has entered the bargaining phase of exhaustion. You sweat through every layer of clothing. The sun does not shine. It punishes. There is no shade. There are no trees. The prairie is a wide, flat promise of torment. Your hat, once a symbol of rugged resolve, now functions as a sweat collector and occasional bug trap. The oxen shuffle ahead of you, unhurried and unimpressed. Their tails swish with contempt. Their eyes are dead. Their hooves plod the trail with a rhythm that seems intentionally demoralizing. You try to keep pace, but your legs have begun drafting a formal resignation letter to your brain. You keep moving out of spite. Every few miles, you pass the remains of other people's optimism. A broken wheel, a scorched skillet, a child's doll missing a head. Someone's dreams lie half buried in the dirt beside a rusted tin cup. You don't stop to ponder it. You're too tired. Besides, your own tin cup is rattling ominously in your bag, reminding you of how little water you have left. When the trail dips into a shallow creek, you pause to refill your canteen. The water is greenish, still, and smells faintly of fish and fear. You strain it through a piece of cloth and convince yourself that's enough purification. You drink, you pray, you walk on. The oxen pause suddenly. One of them drops something unmentionable. You step in it. Of course you do. There's no avoiding it. The trail is a minefield of past meals and unresolved digestive episodes. You scrape your boot on a rock and keep going. No one says anything. Everyone else is too busy with their own personal apocalypse. Somewhere ahead, someone sings. It's not a song of joy. It's a dirge disguised as morale. You join in out of desperation. It helps for about 30 seconds. Then you trip over a root and curse the landscape. The sun tilts westward, offering no relief. The temperature drops by a few degrees, but the air remains dry and thick with trail funk. Your shirt clings to your body like a damp accusation. Your socks, once white, now resemble damp leather. You develop a limp, but refuse to acknowledge it. Pain is just another part of the journey. Your body adjusts to suffering the way a sponge adjusts to water. You think briefly about home. Then you remember home has plumbing, chairs, and the absence of oxen. You cry a little. No one notices. By mid-afternoon, you've traveled a grand total of 8 miles. 8 out of more than 2,000. Someone has a celebratory biscuit. You hate them. You eat yours anyway. It tastes like disappointment and unspoken resentment. A child complains about the dust. Another wants to go home. You almost say, "Me too." But stop yourself. You're the adult. You're supposed to inspire confidence. Instead, you hand them a piece of jerky and mutter something about adventure. The jerky cracks a molar. You nod solemnly. This is the way. As the sun begins to set, the light shifts. Everything is golden and haunting. The prairie becomes beautiful in that cruel, uncaring way nature often has. You try to feel awe. All you feel is exhaustion. The dust glows in the fading light like airborne regret. Your legs are numb. Your lips are cracked. You smell like boiled despair and roadkill. And then finally someone says the words you've been waiting to hear all day. "Let's camp here." You drop to the ground. Not gracefully. You crumple like a sack of potatoes tossed from a moving wagon. Your muscles seize. Your spine protests. Your feet are throbbing meatloafs of pain. You remove your boots and discover new shades of suffering. You pretend not to notice the blood. Dinner is prepared with the enthusiasm of condemned prisoners. The fire is small and sullen. The beans are cold. The salt pork is mostly salt and barely pork. You eat anyway. Chewing is optional. You stare at the flames and wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. Someone passes around water. It's warm. You drink. It helps less than it should. You lie back on a makeshift bed of bundled blankets and contemplate the stars. They are beautiful. They are also irrelevant. The only constellation that matters now is the one forming blisters on your feet. You close your eyes. You hear an ox fart. You hear someone crying quietly in the dark. You hear the wind whispering secrets you don't want to know. And just before sleep takes you, you think to yourself, only 1,992 miles to go. Then you dream of boots that fit, water that tastes like water, and a trail that isn't actively trying to murder you. But in the morning, it begins again, because the trail doesn't care. The trail only goes forward. The meal plan. Regret garnished with beans. Welcome to culinary life on the Oregon Trail, where flavor is optional, texture is a gamble, and everything tastes vaguely like dust and despair. You were promised adventure, perhaps even abundance. What you got was a dented tin plate, a boiling pot of questionably hydrated beans, and a biscuit that could double as a construction material. Breakfast begins before the sun rises, mostly because no one's sleeping anyway. Your back hurts, your mouth tastes like axle grease, and someone is already asking where the coffee is. There is no coffee. There was never coffee. Coffee is for people with money, firewood, and emotional stability. What you get instead is a lukewarm cup of regret water, flavored gently with the remnants of whatever cloth was clean enough to strain yesterday's creek sludge through. If it smells like burnt vinegar and desperation, it's ready. You drink it because the alternative is dying of thirst, which frankly is starting to sound appealing. Meanwhile, breakfast is being prepared by the unfortunate soul assigned to cook duty, which is less of a task and more of a punishment. They scoop cold beans from a cracked pot with a stick, reheat them over a flame that sputters like it resents being born, and announce the meal with all the enthusiasm of a funeral director on his day off. The beans, if you can call them that, are a curious shade of brown and possess the consistency of concrete mixed with betrayal. You chew them slowly, not out of savoring, but because chewing is the only thing keeping you from crying. Occasionally, someone suggests adding molasses, a move which briefly raises morale before everyone remembers that sweet beans are still beans. Salt pork is next, and by salt pork, we mean a grey slab of meat so heavily preserved it could outlast empires. It's mostly fat, partially meat, and entirely capable of surviving nuclear fallout. It squeaks when you cut it. It glares when you chew it. You try to convince yourself it's nourishing, but your body knows better. Digestion is a protest. Sometimes the pork is covered in a thin white fuzz. You scrape it off without comment. That's just what people did. You tell yourself the mold is penicillin. It isn't. Biscuits round out the meal, though calling them biscuits is an insult to all baked goods everywhere. They are roundish, dense, and harder than remorse. If you dropped one from the wagon, it would dent the earth. If you bit into one wrong, it would dent your tooth. Someone once found a beetle inside a biscuit and named it Larry. Larry is now part of the group. He's the most nutritious thing anyone's eaten in days. Lunch doesn't exist in the traditional sense. It's more of a conceptual snack. Someone hands you a handful of jerky, which is essentially salted wood shavings that used to be meat. You chew until your jaw begs for mercy. Your water tastes like copper and mildew, filtered through a sock that once belonged to your great aunt. There's a hard tack biscuit if you're lucky, which has absorbed every surrounding smell in the wagon, including pickled cabbage, oxen sweat, and existential dread. You eat it anyway. The trail does not allow pickiness. The trail barely allows survival. By dinner time, everyone is too tired to care. The same beans are reheated. The same pork is sliced. The biscuits now resemble geological samples. There's a rumor someone brought dried apples. That person is now under constant surveillance. You stare into your plate like it owes you money and contemplate your life choices. You used to have taste. You used to have options. You once turned down soup because it was too salty. Now you would fight a grown man for the privilege of licking the inside of an empty soup can. Cleanup is equally grim. There's no sink, no soap, and definitely no warm water. You scrape your plate with a stick, rinse it with the last inch of your canteen, and dry it with a shirt sleeve that hasn't been cleaned since Missouri. The cooking pot is scoured with sand, rage, and spit. You lie to yourself and say it's sterile. It isn't. The oxen watch from a distance, chewing slowly, judging deeply. They know you've hit rock bottom. They live there. Every few days the meal plan changes, usually for the worse. The beans run low. The pork gets slimier. The biscuits turn to powder. You find yourself rationing vinegar. You debate whether cabbage should be pickled or burned. Someone tries to make stew. It comes out grey. Not metaphorically, literally grey. You call it trail soup. It tastes like boiled secrets and boiled socks. A child refuses to eat. You envy them. You eat anyway. Hunger overrides aesthetics. Taste is no longer a factor. Texture is a personal attack. Over time, your body adjusts. Your stomach hardens. Your standards plummet. You dream of fresh bread and wake to the sound of someone coughing into the bean pot. You begin to hoard sugar, vinegar, anything with even a trace of flavor. You sniff your coffee tin every morning, hoping for a miracle. It remains empty. You cry, but silently. This is the Oregon Trail. There is no room for loud sadness. Occasionally, you stumble across a trading post. You trade an heirloom for a carrot. The carrot is half rotten and has seen horrors. You eat it raw. It's the best thing you've had in weeks. You consider crying again. Instead, you write about it in your journal. Day 23. Ate a carrot. Felt alive. Saw God. But the carrot is gone now, and it's back to beans. Always beans. The flavor of regret. The aroma of compromise. The legacy of poor planning and overconfidence. You once scoffed at people who packed barrels of dried apples and jars of pickles. Now you would trade a family member for a dill spear. You begin to fantasize about salt. Just salt. Not as a seasoning, but as a meal. You remember soup. You remember butter. You remember chewing without injury. All gone. Eaten or imagined. The meal plan has evolved into a survival algorithm. If it's edible, eat it. If it's questionable, eat it and hope. If it moves, kill it and ask questions later. One man swears he saw a squirrel. Another claims it was a hallucination. No one cares. You've all started seeing things. By week 5, you develop theories about the beans. You suspect they're alive, reproducing, spreading. You swear you cooked the last batch yesterday, yet here they are again, multiplying in the pot, watching. You eat them anyway. It's a quiet truce. In the end, the meal plan isn't about nourishment. It's about managing morale with minimal resources and maximum internal damage. It's about chewing through denial, seasoning everything with resignation, and washing it down with hope-flavored water. You don't eat because you're hungry. You eat because the fire is still going and your body hasn't quit. Yet. You eat because the trail demands movement, and movement demands calories. You eat because beans don't argue. Beans just are. Like the dust. Like the oxen. Like the pain. And when someone finds a single square of chocolate at the bottom of a bag, you divide it 17 ways and weep while tasting it. For a moment, you remember what life used to be. Then the chocolate is gone. And it's back to beans. Again. Forever. Until Oregon. Or death. Whichever comes first. Meet the oxen. Dumb, flatulent, and your only hope. Let's talk about the real stars of this journey. Not you. Not your family. Not even the wagon that you've started whispering to in moments of doubt. No. The only reason you've made it even 5 miles without collapsing into a ditch and asking the prairie to swallow you is because of the oxen. Your oxen. The 4-legged paradoxes of power and passive aggression. When you first chose them, probably from a shady trader with more whiskers than teeth, you thought you were making a smart investment. You nodded solemnly as he slapped their flanks and said words like strong, sturdy, and trail-tested. He did not mention unmotivated, fart-powered, or will stop in the middle of a thunderstorm to chew grass for 3 hours. Oxen are not horses. They do not gallop. They do not respond to carrots or compliments. They do not inspire poetry or loyalty. What they do is pull, slowly, grudgingly, like depressed tractors wrapped in cowskin. You named them something adorable back in Missouri. Buttercup, Chestnut, Clover, Hank. That was before the suffering. Now they are simply despair, apathy, accident-prone, and still Hank. Hank is somehow both the smartest and the worst. He makes eye contact when he defecates in front of your sleeping area. You suspect he does it on purpose. Oxen work in pairs. They are yoked together, which makes sense metaphorically, because one cannot suffer alone. If one wants to move and the other does not, guess what? Nobody moves. If one steps in a gopher hole and limps for the rest of the day, the other must adjust, or drag him mercilessly. Usually, they both stop to consider the futility of it all. You try to motivate them. You shout. You wave a stick. They blink slowly. You throw a pine cone. They fart in unison. Movement resumes only when you've emotionally surrendered and are walking away muttering to yourself. Then they decide, it's time. You think this is coincidence. It is not. Oxen possess a deep and ancient knowledge of human limits, and they delight in pushing you to the edge of them. Their pace is not measured in miles per hour, but in existential crises per day. At their peak speed, you are covering maybe 15 miles. At their worst, you are traveling backward in your soul. Steering them is an art form no one has mastered. The reins are symbolic. The yoke twists at random. The oxen wander toward whatever seems most likely to kill them. Steep cliffs, swamps, wasp nests, and suspiciously glowing mushrooms. It is not uncommon for one to turn around entirely, prompting a 3-hour ordeal of coaxing, praying, and questioning your commitment to civilization. Feeding them is a chore, a science, and a gamble. They require constant grazing. If the grass is bad, they get grumpy. If the grass is good, they take their time, chewing each blade like it contains answers to the universe. You are not allowed to rush them. You've tried. You've failed. They do not respond to urgency. They respond to vibes. Brushing them is equally humiliating. You wake up early, grab your brittle trail brush, and try to clean the dust from their flanks while they stare into the void. They blink once every 10 minutes. You apologize for yelling yesterday. They do not forgive. They do not forget. You form emotional bonds. You do not choose this. It just happens. After a few weeks of travel, you begin referring to them as the boys or the crew. You talk to them more than to your children. You confess things. You share secrets. You suspect they understand. They probably don't, but they listen, which is more than can be said for most humans in your party. When one goes lame, and it will, it is not just a setback, it is a crisis. Your entire journey depends on 4 animals who resent your existence. If Hank throws a shoe, or the oxen equivalent, you spend hours limping along, dragging a reluctant beast across rocks and ruts, while everyone else glares at you like you personally ruined the concept of forward motion. You try to bargain at the next trading post. They have a replacement. It's half dead, drooling, and looks like it's been kicked by a bear. You take it anyway. You name it regret. You hope for the best. Oxen don't complain. They groan. They moan. They snort at night like possessed trombones. They are louder than thunder. One wakes you up by sneezing directly onto your blanket. You question every decision that led to this moment. Yet despite their shortcomings, and they are legion, the oxen are your only hope. You are not pulling the wagon. Your children aren't. Your neighbors aren't. If the oxen stop, the world stops. You don't eat. You don't move. You don't survive. This dependency breeds a form of respect, not admiration, not affection. Respect. You feed them before yourself. You pour your last cup of water into a tin for Hank, while your lips crack from dehydration. You stroke their noses while your hands bleed from splinters. You defend them when others grumble. They're doing their best, you say. You are lying, but you say it anyway, because you need to believe it. One day, someone in your party loses an ox. Not metaphorically, it dies. Right there on the trail. Heart failure, infection, bad grass. Who knows? It collapses mid-step and does not rise. The silence is heavy. A burial is attempted, then abandoned. The ground is too hard. The mood is too bleak. The carcass is left for the vultures. You look at your own team and wonder who's next. Probably still Hank. You hope not. He's a jerk, but he's your jerk. By the second month, you no longer notice the smell. You no longer mind the snorting. You no longer question the pace. The oxen have set the rhythm of your life. One slow, dusty step at a time. You move when they move. You rest when they chew. You feel pride when they climb a hill without stalling. You feel fear when they hesitate near a river. You whisper to them before sleep. You dream of better beasts. But you wake up to them every day, chewing, breathing, existing, like you, together. And that's the cruel magic of the Oregon Trail. The creatures you began by mocking now define your survival. They are dumb. They are flatulent. And they are your only hope. First breakdown. You, the butter churn, and a bent nail. It always starts with a sound. Not a scream, not a roar, just a small, sharp crack. Barely louder than a twig snapping underfoot. But that's all it takes. That one delicate crunch is the prologue to disaster. You freeze mid-step. The oxen stop chewing. The wagon creaks ominously, as if it too senses betrayal in the air. And there it is. A broken wheel spoke, or a bent axle, or a single nail that finally decided it was done being a nail. You stare at it. It stares back. You do not speak. You simply know in your bones that the rest of your day is gone. Welcome to your first breakdown. It will not be your last. Let's set the scene. It's late morning. The sun is rising to its full punitive potential. You've already been walking for hours. Your last meal was a fistful of jerky and an argument. The oxen are in a rare mood of partial cooperation. Spirits are low but not yet subterranean. And then it happens. A bump in the trail. A shift in the wagon's weight. A ridiculous object, like a butter churn, placed exactly where it shouldn't be. And suddenly, your entire supply of sanity is scattered across a sun-baked field, wedged between a pile of cracked wood, and the realization that you are very, very bad at wagon maintenance. The butter churn, of course, is a point of contention. No one wanted it. Everyone blames someone else for packing it. You're sure it was Aunt Martha's idea. She's equally sure it was yours. Regardless, it was lashed to the wrong side of the wagon, where its bulk subtly shifted the center of gravity until one wheel finally snapped under the weight of dairy ambition. You pull off the trail, which sounds simple until you realize that pulling anything that weighs over a ton, with animals that view every instruction as a loose suggestion, is neither quick nor clean. The wagon lurches like a drunk attempting ballet. The oxen moo with disapproval. You curse gravity, butter, and the inventor of nails. Nails are a problem. You need them. You don't have enough. You thought you packed a small box. You were wrong. You brought a small box of buttons. You discover this during the frantic rummage session that follows the incident. You hold up a button like it might somehow morph into a nail if stared at long enough. It doesn't. This is when the group meeting begins. It's not called a meeting, but that's what it is. Everyone gathers around the wheel. They stare at it. They offer suggestions, most of them useless. Someone suggests prayer. Someone else suggests whiskey. Neither is available. You try lifting the wagon with a stick and 2 rocks. It works until the stick snaps and the wagon collapses another inch, crushing your dignity further into the soil. You examine the broken wheel. It's bad. Not catastrophic, but bad. You're going to need to remove it, replace the broken spoke, and somehow hammer the whole thing back into working shape using tools last sharpened during the Jackson administration. It's at this point that you remember you have no idea how wheels work. You once read a pamphlet about wheel repair. It was confusing and full of diagrams you didn't understand. The words hub and fellow swirl in your mind like a fever dream. You grab the hammer. You miss the nail. Twice. Then you bend the nail. Congratulations. You're now angry and less resourced than before. Someone suggests using a spoon. You glare at them so hard they walk away. The oxen lie down. They know this will take a while. Someone offers you a piece of bacon. You throw it at a tree. Morale is circling the drain. You finally manage to wedge the wheel off. You lose a fingernail in the process. You don't mention it. The blood is the same color as your mood. The replacement spoke is too long. You shave it down with a knife so dull it might as well be a butter stick. The sun moves across the sky. Your temper moves with it. At some point, you accidentally hammer your thumb. You scream so loudly a nearby prairie dog keels over. You cry. Briefly. Quietly. With dignity. You resume work. The butter churn is now a symbol. Of what? No one is sure. You contemplate setting it on fire. You remember there's a firewood shortage. You reconsider. Eventually, miraculously, the wheel holds. It wobbles, but it holds. The wagon looks like it's leaning in defeat, but technically, it rolls. The butter churn has been demoted to ballast. It is tied down with extra rope and a whispered curse. You re-hitch the oxen, who rise with the grace of ancient flatulent statues. The trail awaits. Again, you have lost 6 hours, 2 pounds of water weight, and a small piece of your soul. You have gained blisters, an irrational hatred of carpentry, and the knowledge that everyone is quietly judging you. The group moves on. No one claps. No one congratulates. Everyone is silently grateful it wasn't their wagon. You walk in silence for the next few miles. The wind kicks up dust. The sun begins to lower. The trail stretches ahead like a smirking god. Your muscles ache. Your clothes are damp. Your hands are raw. But the wheel turns. The oxen trudge. The butter churn mocks you from its corner. You think about how this was supposed to be a journey of reinvention, a brave march into opportunity. And instead, it is you, a warped wagon, a bent nail, and a half-destroyed dairy appliance tumbling toward oblivion. The Oregon Trail does not reward competence. It rewards perseverance, poorly. And tomorrow, if the wheel holds, you will do this all again, with fewer nails and even less hope. The river crossing. Welcome to your floating coffin. Eventually, it happens. You reach a river, not a cute little creek where you dip your toes and wash your sins away, but a real river, wide, swift, and grinning like it knows things about your future that you do not. It doesn't have a name yet, or if it does, it's been whispered only in curses and poorly spelled journal entries. You stand at the bank and realize this isn't just a water hazard, it's an existential event. This is the part of the Oregon Trail where things stop being metaphorical and start being potentially fatal. You, your wagon, your oxen, and every poor decision you've made are about to attempt something you have no business attempting. Welcome to the river crossing. The water is deeper than expected. It always is. You try to measure it with a stick, but the stick disappears into the current like it owed someone money. A debate begins. Do you cork the wagon and float it? Do you ford the river and hope for a miracle? Or do you pay the ferry toll, which costs approximately your dignity, half your flour, and one child's future inheritance? Nobody wants to admit that they don't know what they're doing, so everyone pretends this is fine. A few optimistic souls suggest the float method. We'll cork it up, they say. It'll be like a boat, they say. They forget that your wagon is not, in fact, a boat. It is a box, a wooden box, with wheels, filled with beans, damp biscuits, iron cookware, and a sense of impending doom. It was not designed to float, it was barely designed to roll. But you're committed now. The tar comes out, the cracks are sealed, the seams are smeared with pine pitch and blind faith. Someone ties barrels to the sides, as if buoyancy can be summoned through desperation. The oxen look at you with the same expression they used when you fed them sour oats. Quiet, bovine disbelief. Then comes the actual crossing. It starts with hope. The wagon floats, technically, for about 11 seconds. Then it tilts. A creak, a groan, a scream. Something shifts inside, probably the butter churn again. The water rushes in like it's been waiting all week for this moment. Panic sets in. You are no longer fording a river. You are piloting a mobile coffin. Children shriek. Adults yell conflicting orders. Someone shouts, "Bail!" and begins flinging water with a ladle. It is not effective. The oxen, now swimming reluctantly, decide to make a break for the far bank. The yoke jerks. The wagon lurches. A barrel of flour flips into the river and floats away like a ghost of baked goods past. You can do nothing. You are part of the chaos now. You are wet, cold, and emotionally hollow. The water is everywhere, soaking your supplies, mocking your packing strategy, dissolving your last dry biscuit. By some miracle, or pure stubborn physics, and you make it across. The wagon is half flooded. Your boots squelch. Your clothes stick to you like remorse. You crawl onto the far shore, gasping like a fish, and immediately trip over a rock. The oxen emerge behind you, triumphant, dripping, still chewing. You begin unloading. Everything smells like mildew and fear. The beans have swelled into a shapeless paste. The biscuit tin has rusted. Your journal is now an unreadable sponge, and the butter churn, somehow, has remained perfectly intact. Of course it has. You will never be rid of it. But let's rewind for a moment. Suppose you chose not to float. Suppose you decided to ford the river on foot, guiding the wagon across the shallows with a prayer and a rope. That sounds smarter, until you remember the bottom is not made of golden sand but of sharp rocks, hidden holes, and the occasional snapping turtle with a grudge. The oxen panic. The current grabs a wheel. The wagon tips sideways and starts leaking like a gossip. Suddenly, everything is either underwater or trying not to be. Someone falls in. Someone else tries to help and also falls in. You are now part of a slow-motion, wet stampede. You shout things that make no grammatical sense. Hold the axle with your soul. Grab the rope before the rope grabs you. None of it matters. The river is in charge now. And it's not interested in your theories. Or perhaps you were wise. You paid for the ferry. You sold a family heirloom and half your salt to a man who smells like wet tobacco and broken dreams. He operates a floating death plank tied together with twine, spit, and local folklore. You roll your wagon on. He mutters something about balance. You nod like you understand physics. Halfway across, the ferry groans. You swear you hear a plank crack. The ferryman lights a pipe. You assume he's saying a prayer. He's not. He's just bored. You make it. Barely. You want to thank him. He's already gone, towing the next sucker into aquatic uncertainty. One way or another, you're across. That's all that matters. Except it's not. Because now you must dry your clothes, your gear, and your pride. You hang things on bushes. You wring out your blankets. You spread your boots in the sun and hope they don't warp into medieval foot traps. Everything smells like damp wool and regret. You sit by a fire that refuses to light. You eat beans that now come with a hint of river mud. You try to laugh. It sounds like a sob. At night, you dream of drowning. You wake up coughing. The oxen snore nearby, unimpressed. The river is behind you. Another one waits ahead. And another. And another. Because this trail is not a journey. It's a series of wet disasters, separated by long walks and bad beans. The river crossing is not a test. It is a rite of passage. A soggy baptism into the full futility of your decision. You are no longer a settler. You are a survivor. Of water. Of wheels. Of the moment your butter churn almost took you to the bottom. You stare into the darkness and whisper to no one in particular. Next time, I build a bridge. The wind laughs. The trail waits. You pack up. You move on. Because there is no other choice. Disease arrives. Dysentery doesn't knock. One morning you wake up and something feels off. It's not the usual blisters or the crushing emotional weight of your life decisions. It's not the damp clothes or the rancid beans. It's inside you. A quiet rebellion brewing in your intestines. You tell yourself it's just gas. It isn't. Welcome to dysentery. The silent, violent, utterly democratic curse of the trail. It doesn't knock, doesn't wait, doesn't care. One moment you're sipping tepid water and pretending to enjoy a biscuit. The next, you're sprinting into the bushes holding your midsection like it's a hand grenade with a pulled pin. This is not a temporary inconvenience. This is a lifestyle change. And it spreads. Oh, does it spread? Like gossip at a quilting circle. One person gets it, then two, then eight, and suddenly the whole camp is a symphony of groans, moans, and the unmistakable sound of humans losing control of their lower bodies in the great open air. You would think you'd be prepared. You've read the pamphlets. You packed the herbs. You even brought a small book titled Remedies for Trail Ailments that now serves as emergency toilet paper. Nothing helps. Not the vinegar. Not the chalky powder that smells like sadness. Not the well-meaning advice from Cousin Edgar, who insists you need to sweat it out while he boils water and looks pleased with himself. Dysentery does not negotiate. It arrives like a tax collector and leaves like a tornado, taking dignity, water, and sometimes your will to live. It's a disease of the bowels, yes, but also of morale. Spirits drop. Tempers flare. The oxen become nervous. The very ground begins to feel cursed. You try to maintain routine. You try to march forward. But marching with dysentery is like waltzing through a minefield. Every step is a gamble. Every cough is a threat. You build makeshift latrines that are nothing more than shameful holes surrounded by dry grass and denial. Privacy is a luxury long abandoned. Modesty, a distant memory. You dig with a stick, squat like a broken puppet, and pray for mercy. It rarely comes. Dehydration follows. It always does. You lose water faster than you can replace it. Your lips crack. Your head spins. You hallucinate clean restrooms and running faucets. You dream of porcelain thrones and real doors. Instead, you get lukewarm creek water with a side of parasites. You boil it, filter it, bless it. Nothing works. You still end up sweating out both fluids and optimism in equal measure. Children cry. Adults curse. Someone dies. Quietly. Overnight. No drama. No monologue. Just a still shape under a blanket. You wrap them up. Dig a shallow grave. Say a few words that sound more like apologies than eulogies. And move on. The trail does not pause. You must keep going. The living still need water. The oxen still need grass. The wagon, cruelly oblivious, still needs pushing. Meanwhile, the rest of the party begins arguing about causes. It was the beans. It was the water. It was the bad vinegar. Maybe the butter churn was cursed all along. Theories fly. None are helpful. One man insists on spiritual cleansing. Another insists on purging the sick. You all just want a nap and a working stomach. Hygiene, once a concept, now becomes an obsession. People wash their hands so often their skin flakes off. Others give up entirely and roll in ash. The smell of carbolic soap mingles with human panic. You build quarantine zones that consist of someone lying under a different tree. You try to isolate the worst cases, but isolation on the trail is a joke. Everyone shares the same water, the same food, the same air. You are already contaminated. Even the oxen seem aware. They keep their distance. They chew thoughtfully, watching you suffer like gods from an older, smellier religion. Some people recover, slowly, awkwardly. They rejoin the group as changed beings, quieter, thinner, less trusting of anything labeled stew. Others fade, not dramatically, just incrementally, a little weaker each day until they can't stand, can't walk, can't even hold the ladle. You whisper encouragements and lies. You'll feel better by tomorrow. You won't. Just drink more water. It's poison. We're almost there. You are not. You never are. Dysentery doesn't just hurt bodies. It hurts morale. It breaks the rhythm of the journey. Where once you marched together, now you stagger apart. People fall behind. Conversations die out. Songs become groans. Even the sky looks duller. The trail feels longer. You begin to measure days not by distance, but by how many made it to the next camp still upright. Food becomes a problem. No one wants to eat. No one can keep it down. The beans remain untouched. You consider this a small mercy. Salt pork turns to rubber in your throat. Hardtack becomes weaponized dryness. You gnaw anyway. You must. Strength is not optional. The weak fall quickly. Dysentery ensures that. You start boiling everything. The water, the food, your clothes. You burn the ladle. You carve a new one. It cracks. You use your hands. Sanity begins to fracture. You find yourself talking to a biscuit. It does not respond, but it understands. By the end of the week, the camp is quieter. Fewer jokes, fewer arguments, just the sound of wind, moaning oxen, and the occasional urgent sprint into the tall grass. You mark time by the number of graves. 6 now, maybe 7. You stopped counting. You begin to forget what health felt like. You start accepting that your life will always involve stomach cramps and sudden fear. But then, like all things on the trail, the outbreak fades. You're not sure how. No one is. Maybe the water changed. Maybe the gods were bored. Maybe the butter churn finally absorbed enough sorrow and became inert. You don't care. You can keep food down. You can walk in a straight line. You can almost taste things again. You declare yourself well. You are not. You are just less sick than before. The trail continues. You drag the wagon forward. You glance sideways at the river, and it doesn't mock you this time. You drink without flinching. You eat with grim resolve. You step over a fresh grave and try not to look at the name. It might have been yours. It still could be, because the trail doesn't stop, and neither does dysentery. It just waits. Somewhere, downstream, for another chance. Weather roulette, heat stroke, hailstorm, then bean water. One of the great joys of the Oregon Trail is waking up every morning and playing a game called What Will the Sky Do to Me Today? There are no rules, no logic, and definitely no consistency. You are now part of a mobile experiment in meteorological suffering. You are no longer a settler. You are a pawn in a divine weather simulation being run by a bored deity with a sick sense of humor. At dawn, you begin the day in a thick wool shirt because the air is crisp and polite. You think maybe today will be merciful. You are wrong. By mid-morning, the sun turns into a glowing tyrant, boiling the top of your skull like an egg left in a smithy. Your hat offers no protection. It is now a damp sponge fused to your forehead. You try to drink water, but it's warm and tastes faintly of beans, regret, and the inside of a leather pouch. The heat builds. The wind dies. The oxen begin to slow, which is impressive because their default speed is apocalyptic crawl. One of them stares into the distance, contemplating the concept of death. You join him. You sweat through your clothes. Then you sweat through your skin. Then you consider shedding your identity and becoming part of the dust. You've never experienced this much internal boiling. You lie down under the wagon and find out that the shade is worse. The heat has collected there like it's planning a coup. The ground is hot enough to fry what's left of your optimism. And then, because the trail hates patterns, the wind returns. But now it's furious. Clouds form. Dark, mean clouds. The kind that look like they've seen things. You hear distant thunder. You pretend it's someone's stomach. It's not. It begins with a drop. Then another. Then the sky opens and dumps a biblical fury upon your party. This is not rain. This is punishment. Cold, sharp, wind-driven missiles of water slash into your skin like unpaid debts. The wagon leaks immediately. Your belongings are soaked in 30 seconds. The butter churn floats. Again. The oxen panic and lurch into a bush. One of them sneezes so hard it knocks over the wash basin. You try to cover your supplies with a tarp, but the tarp has given up. It flaps away like a depressed ghost. Someone tries to sing to raise morale. They are booed into silence by the thunder. And then the hail comes. Because why not? Small at first, then larger, then the size of very angry marbles. It hammers everything. Heads, backs, the last good pan. One person screams, "My stew!" as their dinner is annihilated by sky ice. You try to find shelter, but there is none. The trees are too far. The bushes are a joke. The wagon is full. You stand there, soaked, pelted, broken, asking the clouds what you ever did to deserve this. They do not answer. After an hour of chaos, it stops. The sun comes back out like nothing happened. Birds chirp. The sky is blue. The trail glistens with puddles that smell like wet livestock and moldy beans. Your clothes stick to you like betrayal. Everything is heavy. Everything is ruined. You wring out your shirt and get enough water to make soup. You call it trail broth. You pretend it's nourishing. It tastes like failure and sock lint. The oxen resume walking with an air of deep emotional detachment. One of them steps on your last dry blanket. No one apologizes. You trudge forward, squelching. Mud sucks at your boots with every step. You're no longer walking. You're performing an interpretive dance called Why Did I Leave Missouri? You pass a group trying to dig a drainage trench. They wave weakly. One falls in. You say nothing. In the afternoon, the sun returns to its hobby of grilling humans alive. The mud hardens into cracked earth. Your boots crackle like overbaked bread. Your lips sting. You forgot to dry your socks. Your feet rebel. Blisters bloom like angry flowers. And then, just before dusk, the wind picks up again. Cooler this time. Almost pleasant. You let yourself hope. That's your mistake. Because the wind smells like beans. And not fresh beans. These are haunted beans. Trail beans. The kind that have been boiled, reheated, left out, cursed, and then boiled again in sadness. The source. Tonight's dinner. Bean water. A stew so lifeless it could be a philosophy class. But you eat it. You must. It's all there is. You sip the warm sludge and tell yourself it's protein. It isn't. It's texture. It coats your tongue in historical trauma. And then the wind shifts again. Now it's cold. Bitter cold. You were boiling 12 hours ago. Now your fingers are shaking and your breath fogs the air. You wrap yourself in wet blankets and dream of controlled climates and thermostats. Someone tries to start a fire. Everything's too damp. They manage a sputtering flame the size of a thimble. It casts just enough light to remind you how miserable you are. And that's the Oregon Trail's weather for you. There are no seasons, only moods. The sky swings between extremes like a drunk on a unicycle. No warning, no balance, just scorching, freezing, flooding, and somewhere in the middle, beans. By nightfall, you're exhausted from adapting. Your body aches from tension. You stare at the stars and wonder if they're laughing. You try to sleep. You're too cold, then too hot. Then someone kicks you. You give up. Morning will come. It always does. And it will bring more weather. You hope for mild. You expect fire and frogs. You pack up. You move on. Because weather roulette never ends. You just spin the sky again and again until the trail ends. Or you do. The food situation. If it moves, it's probably dinner. At the start of your noble westward journey, you packed food like a well-organized grocery aisle. You had flour, bacon, beans, coffee, sugar, salt, and an unearned sense of culinary optimism. You told yourself there would be campfire stews, hearty breakfasts, and perhaps the occasional foraged berry gently placed on top of a warm biscuit. What you have now is a half-crushed sack of beans, a mystery jar labeled lard, and a piece of salt pork that smells like it's developed its own religion. The food situation is no longer a situation. It is a crisis, a slow-burning, flavorless emergency. Your daily meals have become exercises in creative disappointment. Breakfast is hot water with something floating in it, usually disappointment, occasionally a bean fragment. Lunch is dried, regret chewed in silence. Dinner is a group exercise in denial, centered around a pot of brown slush that once dreamed of being stew. The bacon ran out weeks ago. The sugar vanished during that hailstorm. You think the last of the coffee was stolen by a raccoon, or perhaps a desperate cousin. You will never know. You mourn it like a friend. Hunger is now your constant companion. It gnaws at your insides like a bored rodent, whispering nonsense like, "What if we boiled a sock?" You've considered it. The salt might improve the flavor. You've licked rocks. Not proudly, but scientifically. There was no nutritional value, just shame. The beans, your old staple, have turned against you. They no longer soften. They mock your attempts at cooking. You boil them for hours. They remain pebbles. You mash them. They laugh. You eat them anyway, and your digestive system retaliates with the fury of 10,000 angry burrows. You are now fluent in gas. Everyone is. Conversations have become rhythmic exchanges of groans and blame. Someone suggests catching a squirrel. You laugh, but not out loud. Not anymore. You tried that once. It did not go well. The squirrel won. Now you eye wildlife differently. Birds, mice, things with too many legs. If it moves and it looks remotely edible, it enters the mental menu. Your standards have collapsed. Last week, you saw a possum and your stomach said, maybe. Yesterday, you watched a beetle crawl across a biscuit and thought, extra protein. You chase a rabbit with a spoon. You fail. But the intention was there. Occasionally, someone shoots something. A rabbit, a bird, once even a very slow-moving deer. The camp erupts into celebration. It's not joy, it's relief. You've never seen people cry over a squirrel roast. But here you are. The meat is gamey, stringy, sometimes questionable. You don't care. You chew like it's a miracle. You scrape the bones. You drink the broth. You thank a god you weren't sure you believed in. Then you spend the next 12 hours arguing over how to ration the leftovers. Fights erupt over who gets the leg. Alliances form and dissolve. One man hides a piece of jerky in his hat. It is discovered. He is exiled. He returns 4 hours later. No one speaks of it. Foraging becomes a daily routine. You learn which berries kill and which just make you wish you were dead. You dig for roots. You boil bark. You chew things described as earthy and bold, which is settler slang for inedible, but not immediately fatal. Someone makes soup out of dandelions and grass. You applaud their bravery. You taste it and consider walking into the river. One day, you find a turtle. You name it dinner. It hisses. You cry. You kill it anyway. You are both the villain and the victim. The meat is rubbery. The shell is kept as a bowl. No part is wasted. The food situation teaches you many things. It teaches you humility. It teaches you desperation. It teaches you that flavor is a privilege, not a right. You once mocked hardtack. Now you'd sell a wagon wheel for a fresh, unbroken piece. You used to ask, "What's for dinner?" Now you ask, "Did anything die today?" Occasionally, someone still tries to be fancy. They season their stew with a pinch of something unlabeled. It might be oregano. It might be dirt. No one knows. No one complains. Because now, the goal is not enjoyment. The goal is calories. Survive the day. Digest what doesn't fight back. Repeat. You've also learned new food groups. Regret is one. Guilt is another. The butter churn remains untouched. But everyone keeps it around like a cursed relic. Maybe one day it will provide something. Maybe not. The trail doesn't care. You stop expecting meals. You start expecting moments of brief relief. Your dreams are filled with pies, feasts, hot bread, and perfectly salted potatoes. You wake up chewing your own sleeve. The group is gaunt, hollow-cheeked, whisper-voiced. You share the last biscuit like it's a religious ceremony. You divide it by molecule. You chew for hours. You savor the air around it. No one speaks. Hunger is sacred. And yet, you press forward. Not because you're brave, but because there is no choice. Hunger does not kill swiftly. It makes you lighter, slower, colder. You feel your ribs more than you feel hope. And that is the food situation on the Oregon Trail. If it moves, it's probably dinner. If it doesn't move, you consider seasoning it anyway. You become the animal. You lose the etiquette. You keep walking. The trail eats your meals, your morals, and eventually your memories. But not your hunger. That stays. Always. Death on the trail. No funerals, just forward. It doesn't arrive with music. It doesn't announce itself with cinematic flair. Death on the Oregon Trail is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's casual. It's Tuesday. 1 minute, someone's walking beside the wagon complaining about beans. The next, they're face down in the dirt, still holding a spoon. You stop. You stare. You say nothing. Because what is there to say? The trail has no room for eulogies. No one stands up to give a speech about their spirit. No one sings. You're too tired. They're too dead. It becomes a task, a chore, like washing clothes or swatting flies. Someone dies. You dig a hole. You put them in it. If you're sentimental, you use a rock as a headstone. If you're practical, you don't. Rocks are heavy. Every death is a logistical inconvenience. A slowdown, a delay. The body has to be moved. Sometimes it's not even easy to find a place to bury it. The ground is rocky, or frozen, or already full. You consider a shallow grave. You settle for the nearest slope. You say a few words that sound more like grunts. You pack up. You move on. Because you have to. Grief doesn't fit in the wagon. You bury children. You bury friends. You bury people whose names you still can't pronounce correctly. You bury people who annoyed you. You bury people you loved. After a while, it all feels the same. You become numb. Not cold. Just empty. One day, a man you barely know dies in the night. His wife shakes him, then doesn't. She covers his face. She doesn't cry. She just stares into the dark. You all watch. Then you help dig. You all keep moving like nothing happened. Because that's the rule. The trail keeps going. So do you. Occasionally, someone wants a real funeral. A song, a prayer, a cross. You nod. Then you whisper, 15 minutes. Because the oxen are already getting restless. You dig faster. You hum something. You nod solemnly while staring at the sun. You throw dirt. You walk away. Later, you forget where the grave was. It blends in with the rest of the landscape. A hill, a bump, a memory that doesn't quite stay put. The children stop asking questions. At first, they asked, "Where's Uncle?" Or, "Why is the wagon lighter?" Or, "Why did we throw away his boots?" Now they just look at you, then look away. They know. Everyone knows. You do not rest when someone dies. You repack. You redistribute weight. You update the inventory. -1. Sometimes you inherit their belongings. A comb, a book, a coat that doesn't fit. You put it on anyway. It smells like them. Eventually it smells like you. One time, a man died while still holding the reins. The oxen didn't even notice. They kept walking. He just slumped forward. You only realized when the wagon veered into a ditch. No one said much. You fixed the wagon, pulled him down, dug, moved on. Another time a woman died, and her husband refused to leave her. He sat beside the grave all day. You offered him bread. He didn't take it. That night, he walked off into the trees. You didn't follow. He never came back. The next morning his boots were gone. Someone took them. Quietly. There's no judgment. There's just need. The trail teaches you that death is not sacred. It's statistical. It's measured in supplies, in delays, in how much space is suddenly available in the wagon. You ration grief like flour, sparingly, carefully, because too much will break you. Some people mark graves with wooden signs. They carve names with shaky hands. A week later the sign is gone. Wind, rain, animals, maybe other travelers too desperate to care. You stop leaving signs. You start leaving nothing. You tell yourself it's better that way. Let the land take them. Let the trail have them. It already has everything else. The oxen do not mourn. They do not pause. They do not understand. You envy them. They know only forward. Sometimes at night, you hear someone crying. Soft, ragged, like the sound of boots falling apart. No one mentions it the next day. Crying is private. Death is public. You keep it that way. You once thought you'd be afraid of dying out here. Now you realize it's not fear, it's inevitability. You walk with it. You sleep beside it. You share meals with people you might bury tomorrow. And you eat anyway, because not eating won't stop it. You wonder if someone will bury you. You wonder if they'll use a stone. You wonder if they'll remember your name. Probably not. Probably just a few grunts and a shovel. You accept this, not because you want to, but because it's easier. That's the secret of the trail. It's not about heroism. It's about inertia. You don't survive because you're strong. You survive because you don't stop. And when someone dies, you feel sad for a moment. Then you feel hungry. Then you feel the wind. Then you keep walking, because the trail is still there, and your boots still fit, and there are miles to go. No funerals. Just forward. Always forward. Wildlife encounters. Coyotes, raccoons, and existential skunks. Out here, nature is not your friend. It is not a postcard. It is not a peaceful background hum to your westward ambitions. It is a judgmental force of chaos wrapped in fur, claws, and very specific teeth. And while you trudge forward on a path carved by desperation, every creature you meet out here has one goal: to steal your food, your sleep, your dignity, or all three. Let's begin with coyotes. They are not majestic. They are not noble predators on the hunt. They are opportunists in bad fur coats, watching from the shadows, snickering like highway robbers with nothing to lose. You hear them at night, their cries somewhere between a laugh and a threat. They do not charge. They do not challenge. They wait. You fall asleep to their howls and wake up to missing jerky. One night, you catch them creeping near the wagon. You try to scare them off. They blink at you like you're an underqualified intern interrupting a meeting. You throw a rock. They duck, yawn, and leave. But only until you go back to bed. They always return. Raccoons are worse, because raccoons are smart. Not book smart, evil smart. They have thumbs. They understand latches. They work in teams. They are the mafia of the woodland world. You wake up one morning and the food crate is open. The beans are gone. The sugar is gone. The lard is gone. The raccoons? Still there. Watching. Judging. One of them is holding a spoon. You scream. It does not blink. You once saw one unzip a sack. You've never trusted sacks since. You try to hang your food in a tree. They climb it. You try to bury your food. They dig. You try to reason with them. You offer a trade. One biscuit for peace. They accept the biscuit, take your hat, and leave a dead mouse in return. You are not sure if that's a threat or a gift. Either way, you lose. Then there are the skunks, the existential ones. They do not run. They do not hide. They walk into your camp like they own it, like they've seen the end of the universe, and are unimpressed. You freeze. Everyone freezes. You whisper, "Nobody move." The skunk sniffs the air, looks at your stew, then at you, then back at the stew. You do not breathe. It walks across your bedroll. You accept your fate. It sniffs your boots. You mentally write your last will and testament. Then it leaves, and you feel like you've survived something sacred. But also, you're afraid to sleep, because skunks remember, and they hold grudges. Every animal out here is a threat, a lesson, or a metaphor. You meet porcupines that chew your wagon wheels at night. Why? Who knows? Maybe they're critics. Maybe they just like pine. Either way, you wake up and your wheels look like medieval flails. You meet snakes, which are less dramatic than you'd expect. Most just slide under your blanket at night. You scream. They hiss. You both agree never to speak of it again. You meet birds that steal your soap. Soap. A hawk takes it mid-scrub and flies off. You stare into the sky, naked and covered in dust, and realize that the birds are not with you. They are with the chaos. The oxen do not care. They are technically wildlife, but only in the way that rocks are technically furniture. One of them gets kicked by a mule. It does not react. You wish you had that emotional range. You meet deer. You try to hunt them. They vanish. You meet mice. You don't try to hunt them. They live with you now. In your wagon, in your sleeves. You name one Harold. He steals your flour and dies in your boot. You wear the boot anyway. You meet bears once. Just once. You do not forget it. It is not a fight. It is not an attack. It is a slow, terrifying visitation. The bear approaches. The group screams. Someone throws a shoe. The bear ignores all of it. It sniffs your butter churn, knocks over a pan, sits down, scratches its ear, then wanders off. You feel like you've been judged and found unworthy. You never use that butter churn again. It's sacred now. Some days, you meet nothing, and that's somehow worse. You expect movement, noise, glowing eyes, but instead you get silence, heavy silence. You miss the coyotes. You miss the raccoons. You wonder if they're planning something. They probably are, because on the trail, the animals are not background. They are participants. They have roles. They have agendas. You are not the hero. You are not the top of the food chain. You are a traveling buffet, a tired, confused, poorly armed buffet with bad boots and questionable hygiene, and they know it. So you set your traps, you guard your stew, you sleep lightly, you hang your food, you check your shoes, you keep your head down and your beans close, because the next visitor could be anything. And out here, if it moves, it wants something from you. And if it doesn't move, well, check your boot. It might still be Harold, hygiene abandoned, fermentation, and despair. At the beginning, you tried. You really did. You packed soap. You packed a tin mirror. You packed that awkward little brush with boar bristles you weren't even sure how to use. You told yourself, I will stay clean. I will be different. And for the first 3 days, you washed your hands. You even combed your hair. You changed socks. Once. Then the mud happened. Then the rain. Then the dust, followed by more dust. And then, for variety, a fine powdery dust that worked its way into every crevice of your body. Clothes, food, and hope. Hygiene was no longer a daily habit. It became a concept, an idea, something whispered about around the campfire, like a half-remembered dream. You told stories of baths, clean sheets, scented water. You weren't sure anymore if they were real memories or hallucinations. The truth is, you stink. Everyone stinks. The wagon stinks. The oxen stink so bad, they loop around into something like rustic perfume. You smell like boiled beans, unwashed wool, fermented leather, and low-level panic. You've grown used to it. You had to. Your skin is sticky. Your scalp itches with a frequency that could be measured in time signatures. You've scratched so hard you drew blood. You don't remember what shampoo smells like. You now think sweat is a natural conditioner. Your fingernails are no longer white or pink or any color found in nature. They are wagon brown, trail-colored, permanently outlined with dirt that no amount of river splashing will ever remove. Speaking of rivers, yes, you tried to bathe. Once. It was cold. You screamed. A raccoon stared at you the whole time. Someone stole your shirt while you were waist deep. You now dry off with what used to be a curtain. You tell yourself it's fine. It's not. And then there's your feet. Your poor, abandoned, blasphemed feet. Once they carried you with dignity. Now they resemble archaeological relics. Blisters upon blisters. Cracks deep enough to echo. You no longer feel them most of the day. That's not a good thing. The socks you swore to rotate, they fused to your skin sometime in June. You peeled them off once and watched 2 toes go with them. They came back, but differently, smelling worse, looking haunted. Your boots now have a smell, not an odor, a presence. You once tried to leave them outside the tent. The tent refused to let them back in. Then there's your teeth. You brought a toothbrush, remember? You used it 3 times. Then you lost it somewhere in Nebraska. Or maybe the mule ate it. Either way, your mouth now tastes like a blend of bean residue, panic breathing, and the slow death of enamel. You chew jerky for texture, not nutrition. You floss with twigs. Your breath could strip paint. You stopped smiling. It's safer. As for the communal body stench, it's become a bonding experience, like trauma or group hallucination. You've all accepted that no one here is clean. No one will ever be clean again. You communicate through layers of sweat and musk. You know who's coming by their unique scent trail. It's not disturbing anymore. It's comforting, predictable. But occasionally, someone snaps. They announce a full bath. You watch them strip down, stomp into the creek, scrub with something sharp, and come out shivering, bleeding, spiritually broken. They are dry within minutes. The dust claims them instantly. They emerge from the clouds somehow filthier. They never try again. You once attempted laundry. You boiled your shirt in a pot. The pot died. The shirt shrank. It now fits your raccoon adversary better than it fits you. You've resigned yourself to wearing layers of seasoned clothing. Your undershirt is stiff. It stands on its own when you take it off. Your coat smells like rain, sadness, and expired meat. Your hat contains ecosystems, but you need it. It keeps the sun off your scalp and the lice corralled. Yes, lice. They're here. You don't talk about them, but they're part of the family now. You scratch politely, strategically. Public scratching is normalized. You spot someone digging into their shoulder seam with a spoon. No one blinks. Grooming rituals have devolved into survival maneuvers. You once caught someone boiling their undergarments over a fire. You nodded in respect. No one wears white anymore. It's all shades of trail, beige, brown, suspicious grey. A child once saw a cloud and said, "Look, it's clean." Everyone fell silent. Hygiene is no longer about comfort. It's about infection control, about minimizing risk, about keeping wounds from turning into funerals. You dab vinegar on cuts. You pretend mud is medicinal. You cover things with cloth and pray. The idea of soap is mythical. The last bar crumbled during a hailstorm. You now clean dishes with sand. You consider this effective. It isn't. It just feels like effort. And that's all you have left. Effort. Not results. Just the ritual. You maintain appearances. You brush your hair with a fork. You wipe your face with a sock. You pat yourself down with leaves and call it a bath. You keep walking. You tell yourself that someday, somewhere, there will be a bathhouse. With steam, with towels, with water that doesn't move sideways. You will sit in that bath and scrub away 6 months of trail rot. You will find yourself again, under the layers of despair. But not now. Now, you are a bipedal fermentation vat with dreams. You are a mobile biology experiment with boots. You are hygiene abandoned. You are the trail. Breakdown, mentally and mechanically. It starts with a sound. A soft clunk. A quiet snap. A groan from wood that's held too much weight for too many miles. You ignore it. You always ignore it at first. You pretend it's the wind, or your imagination, or one of the oxen sighing existentially again. But it isn't. It's the wagon. It's the axle. It's the wheel. It's a bolt. It's something important. Something you can't name because you're not a carpenter, or a mechanic, or a miracle worker. You are a tired, sunburnt husk of a human being pretending to know how wagons function. Spoiler. You don't, and now it's broken. Again. And now you stop. Again. And now you sigh. The kind of sigh that can only be sighed by someone who has heard the words, "The wheel's gone sideways," 5 too many times. You inspect it like you're a doctor. You squint. You poke. You nod grimly. You say things like, "Well, that's not good," to establish your credibility. Meanwhile, everyone else just stares at the cracked beam and the lopsided wheel like it's a betrayal. You unstrap the tool bag. It contains 3 nails, a bent spoon, and what might be a screw or a fossil. You apply everything you've learned from months on the trail, which is mostly yelling at wood and pretending friction is a strategy. You bang it with a rock. You wedge it with a stick. You ask it nicely. Nothing works. The wagon has made its decision. It's done. So you adapt. You remove cargo. You lighten the load. You decide which items to sacrifice. Flour, bedding, memories. You leave behind a chair and your last remaining book. Someone tears out the blank pages to use later as toilet paper. You nod. Survival. The wheel creaks. You try again, this time with hope. Big mistake. It collapses completely. The oxen stare at you like you've disappointed them personally. You begin to cry but quickly disguise it as sweat. You are not alone. Others are breaking down too. Their wagons, their spirits, their identities. Once, you had plans. Now you just want the wheel to turn. Just once. Just long enough to reach the next patch of vaguely flat ground. Meanwhile, the human breakdowns begin to outpace the mechanical ones. The man who once joked about everything hasn't spoken in days. He stares at the fire like it owes him money. A woman who used to sing while walking now mutters to herself, rocking slightly, whispering old recipes like protective spells. Children draw pictures in the dust. None of them include houses anymore, just wagons, falling apart. One man throws his shovel into the bushes and refuses to walk. He says he's going to live under a tree. He names the tree Jerry. You let him. He returns 3 hours later covered in ant bites and apologizes to the group. No one says a word. We've all been there. You can't scream at the sky because your throat's dry. You can't punch the wagon because it will win. So you mutter. You grind your teeth. You fix what you can and ignore what you can't. That is how trail repairs work. And that is also how emotions work now. Someone snaps during a storm. They yell about beans and ghosts and how the river whispered their name. You nod. That makes sense. Someone else claims the oxen are plotting against us. No one argues. They probably are. Your grip on reality becomes flexible. You give names to your tools. You apologize to your boots when they crack. You talk to the coffee pot even though there's no coffee. You begin every sentence with, "If I survive this," and then forget what you were going to say. Because mental breakdowns on the Oregon Trail are not dramatic. They are slow, like rot, like mold, like wagon wheels grinding into the same rut for the 10th mile. One day you wake up and realize you've forgotten what day it is. Then you realize you don't care. Then you realize no one else does either. The calendar died with the last bar of soap. Your mind unravels quietly. You forget how many miles are left. You forget what it felt like to be clean. You forget why you started. You become a walking reaction to obstacles, a series of frowns attached to a pair of calloused feet. You don't break all at once. You crack, a little at a time, like the frame of the wagon, like the spokes of the wheel. You creak, you warp, you adjust, and then, suddenly, you don't. And you sit there on a log, staring into the wind, wondering if moss feels this tired. But you get up anyway, because the wagon has to move, the group has to move. The trail demands motion, not sanity, and so you limp along, dragging your broken thoughts beside your broken axle. You meet another group going the other way. They ask if the trail gets better. You laugh. It sounds like choking. They leave faster. You fix the wagon with rope, spit, and muttered threats. You rebuild a broken tongue using part of the butter churn. You lash 2 wheels together with a belt. You become a mechanic through trauma. Nothing works well. It just works enough. You become an expert in barely. You push the wagon with your body. You push people with your words. You push yourself, because stopping feels worse than walking. Breakdown is now part of the schedule. You plan for it. You expect it. You whisper to your wagon every morning, "Just don't break today." It does. You fix it. Again, emotionally you run on fumes. You ration hope. You borrow strength. You find small victories. A bolt that holds, a handle that doesn't snap, a wheel that rolls for 2 whole hours. You celebrate by not crying. The oxen step in a rut, and you lose it anyway. And then, silence. No snapping, no grinding. Just the wagon, creaking in a way that's almost musical. You keep walking, dazed, confused, and suspicious. Something is always about to break. That's the rule. You just don't know when. And that, somehow, is worse. You become a walking premonition, but you walk anyway, because that's what the trail demands. Not stability, not comfort, just momentum. You break, you tape it, you move on. That's the real Oregon Trail. Not adventure, not freedom, just 1,000 small breakdowns, mechanical and mental, patched with stubbornness and the occasional prayer. And if you're lucky, the wheel turns. One more mile, then another, until the next sound, the next crack, the next moment of realization that you are once again exactly where you didn't want to be, on your knees, in the dirt, talking to a busted wheel, wondering if it's you or the wagon that's truly broken. And the answer is yes. Arrival in Oregon, paradise lost and wet. You made it. Technically, you survived the dust, the death, the dysentery, and the decaying wheels. You survived questionable beans, angry raccoons, your own collapsing sanity, and a weather system that seemed engineered by a drunk playwright. And now, after thousands of miles and a level of suffering that should earn you at least 3 sainthoods and a statue made of jerky, you finally arrive at your destination, Oregon, the promised land, the green, fertile, glorious end of the trail, the future. Except it's not, because Oregon greets you not with fanfare, but with rain, relentless, unromantic, sanity-dissolving rain, not the poetic mist of hopeful novels, not the life-giving drizzle of farming dreams. Number, it's the kind of rain that soaks your soul, the kind that laughs at your thin coat and seeps into your boots, your bones, your brain. You step into Oregon and immediately regret having feet. Your wagon collapses, as if it too has decided it's done now. The oxen stop walking and stare into the middle distance like retired gladiators. You look around for something majestic, a sunrise, a valley, a tree. Instead, you find mud, so much mud. Mud in shapes and colors you didn't know existed. Mud that tries to eat your boots. Mud that has opinions. You were promised farmland. You see swamp. You were promised opportunity. You find flooded meadows and a group of settlers arguing about whether or not beets are edible raw. Someone says yes. They are wrong. You try to cry, but you're too dehydrated. So you just blink slowly and let the rain do the crying for you. There are no parades. There is no music. No one hands you a medal. No one cares that you survived. They're all too busy trying to build homes out of logs that won't cooperate and tarps that now smell like despair. You meet a man who arrived last week. He tells you, it gets better. Then he walks into a puddle and disappears. No one speaks of him again. The settlement is a collection of leaning shacks, angry chickens, and soggy optimism. Everyone looks like they've seen too much, because they have. You try to introduce yourself. They nod, hand you a shovel, and point to a hill. You don't ask questions. You dig. That's what people do here. They dig. They build. They stare into the sky and wonder if California was the better choice. Spoiler, it wasn't. You unpack your belongings. All 6 of them. Half are moldy. One smells like raccoon. You lay out your clothes to dry. The rain laughs. You put them back in the wagon. The wagon sinks half an inch into the mud. You stare at it like it's a grave. It is. A grave for dreams. A man nearby is yelling at a tree. You don't intervene. You understand. The tree probably deserved it. You walk to the river. It's too high to cross. You walk back. You try to sleep. The roof leaks. Your blanket leaks. You leak. Oregon is not a conclusion. It is a sequel. A poorly funded, grimy, emotionally unstable sequel to a story no one wanted to keep writing. And yet, you're here. So you start again. You plant things. You hammer nails. You fail. You hammer again. You cook food that somehow tastes worse than what you ate on the trail. You start calling it cuisine. You try to remember why you came. For land. For hope. For a new beginning. For freedom. It all sounded better before your boots filled with swamp water. The locals say the rain lasts 6 months. You laugh. They don't. You ask about seasons. They say wet, and less wet. Someone shows you a calendar. It only has 2 words on it: survive and repeat. You meet children who've never seen sunlight. You meet women who wrestle logs like bears. You meet men who talk to moss. You admire them all. Oregon is not paradise. It is an endurance test with ferns. But somewhere between the broken wagon axle and the cold bean stew, you start to accept it. Not love it, not enjoy it, but accept it. Because it's yours now. This muddy, wet, vaguely fungal nightmare is your reward. You build a cabin. It leans. You fix it. It leans again. You name it hope, because irony is all you have left. You find a dog, or the dog finds you. Either way, it stays. You feed it something unidentifiable. It loves you instantly. You consider this progress. You realize that the hardest part isn't the trail. It's living after the trail. It's figuring out how to be human again after becoming a creature of instinct, sweat, and whispered profanity. You try to write a letter home. It becomes a list of injuries and regrets. You send it anyway. Someone else asks what Oregon's like. You say, green. Then you walk away. You grow potatoes. You fight slugs. You invent new swear words for types of rain. You repair your boots with twine and hopelessness. You start to understand why no one smiles here. Not because they're miserable, but because smiling lets the water in. One day, the sun comes out. Briefly. Everyone stares at it like it's a ghost. Then it disappears, and you pretend it never happened. It's easier that way. You hear rumors of another trail. North, maybe. Or east. You shake your head. Never again. You are done with trails. You are a post-trail creature now. Your dreams smell like mildew and regret. And yet, you survive. That's all Oregon asks. Not happiness. Not victory. Just continued existence, rain-soaked and ankle-deep in mud. Welcome to paradise. It's wetter than you expected. Reflection. Character built through blisters and bean water. You look back now, not because you miss it, but because your legs hurt and the present offers no improvement. You've crossed thousands of miles, eaten thousands of terrible meals, and thought thousands of thoughts you probably shouldn't have said out loud. The Oregon Trail is finished, but it has finished you in the process. You are no longer the person who started this journey. That version of you had dreams, maps, and opinions on hygiene. That version of you thought salt pork would last forever. That version of you didn't cry when stepping in mud. You do. Often. Quietly. Behind the cabin. But it's more than just physical decay. Yes. You've aged in dog years. Yes. Your hands are now calloused artifacts. Yes. You smell like a footnote in a cautionary tale. But something else has changed. Something deeper. You've gained what people call character, which is the word used by people who want to justify suffering without actually fixing anything. You now know the true shape of hardship. It looks like a wheel stuck in a rut. It smells like boiled beans and wet socks. It sounds like someone yelling at a squirrel for stealing their last biscuit. You've learned patience. Not the kind where you calmly wait, but the kind where you silently accept that nothing will ever happen when you want it to. You've learned teamwork, mostly through forced proximity and shared trauma. You've learned leadership, which means choosing which hill to cry on. You've also learned the limits of human dignity. They are surprisingly flexible. You once watched a grown man chase a possum with a boot. He failed. You saluted him anyway. Because out here, effort counts more than outcome. You've also learned silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that sits on your chest like a wet blanket full of disappointment. The kind that follows you from campsite to campsite, echoing inside your skull as you stir another pot of regrets. You've had time to think. Too much time. About life. About mortality. About why someone packed a butter churn for a cross-country nightmare. You've rewritten your priorities. Shelter is good. Warmth is better. Socks are sacred. Trust no one who still smells nice. You used to dream of wealth. Now you dream of dry firewood. You used to want adventure. Now you want a roof that doesn't leak. and beans that don't lie. You've become an alchemist of misery, turning failure into progress, turning breakdowns into folklore, turning flatulence into comic relief. You now find joy in small victories, a wagon wheel that holds, a night without thunder, a bowel movement that doesn't come with medical consequences. These are your milestones now. You've built character, sure, but not the kind they write poems about. The kind that stares into the mirror and thinks, "At least I didn't eat the leather this time." You've learned not to trust blue skies. They mean nothing, just as storms mean everything. You've learned to prepare for disaster the moment something feels mildly okay. You've become part animal, part log, part memory. You wake up before dawn, not out of discipline, but because the wagon creaks in your nightmares. You eat cold beans with a spoon made of desperation. You look at the mountains and see more obstacles, not beauty. You've become efficient, brutally so. You can break down camp in minutes. You can build a fire in the wind. You can mend your coat with bark. You can explain the difference between 5 types of trail blisters, each with their own name, backstory, and mood swings. You don't hesitate anymore. You just react. It's not courage. It's muscle memory built from repeated failures. Your brain has a checklist: shoes, beans, shovel, sanity, in that order. And sanity is optional. You've developed a face, the trail face, the one that doesn't flinch when something goes wrong because everything always does. It's a calm, blank expression with a hint of fatalism, and the quiet suggestion that you've buried more than one person with a spoon. Emotionally, you're drywall. Functionally, you're still moving. That's enough. But maybe, just maybe, you've learned something useful. Something that sticks even after the last wheel turns, after the last coyote scream fades into a memory, after the mud finally dries. You've learned endurance, not the kind that earns medals, the kind that just doesn't stop, even when it should. You keep going, because there's nothing else, because the only way out is through, because if you stop, the raccoons win. You've learned humility, the kind that comes from pooping in the rain while being watched by a judgmental ox. You've learned compromise, like choosing between wet beans and cold beans. You've learned that leadership often means pretending to know what you're doing long enough for others to believe it. You've learned to carry pain like cargo, repack it, shift it, ignore it until the next hill. You've learned that people are fragile but also stubborn, that death is casual, that survival is ugly, and that hope is a shovel you keep using even when the handle breaks. You've seen people collapse and get back up. You've seen people disappear without warning. You've seen yourself in a reflection and not recognized the face, but you've kept walking, because that's what you do now. You walk, you build, you curse, you eat the beans, you wake up, you repeat. And somewhere in that cycle, you became something else. Not better, not stronger, just real. No illusions, no filters. Just a person carved from mud, regret, and maybe a little bit of mold. And that's worth something. Not much, but something. The trail didn't give you treasure. It didn't give you peace. It didn't even give you decent soup. But it gave you a story. A miserable, filthy, glorious story. One you'll tell one day, probably while squinting into a fire, holding a spoon, and wondering if you ever truly escaped. Spoiler, you didn't. Because the trail isn't behind you. It's inside you now. In the way you squint at clouds. In the way you count steps without meaning to. In the way you store beans like they're gold. You are trail-shaped, trail-weathered, trail-hardened. And no matter where you go, no matter how clean the future gets, part of you will always be damp, dusty, and halfway to another breakdown. But that's okay. You earned it. You survived it. You are, for better or worse, the person the Oregon Trail made. A character built through blisters and bean water. Congratulations. Now get back to work. The roof's leaking again.